Are you really sure that the coffee you pick up from Costco every month is actually coffee? It sounds absurd, but millions of Americans are drinking products labeled as coffee that are loaded with fillers, additives, and undisclosed impurities. You might think you are saving a few dollars with every can, but the real price could be your health or worse. For middle-aged and older customers, whose digestion, liver, kidneys, and hormones are no longer as strong as before, starting the day with a cup of mystery blend can quietly set off serious long-term consequences. Coffee prices keep climbing with no end in sight, so do not fool yourself into thinking you can get a good quality bag at a bargain price. The industry is simply cashing in on you. And here's the real shocker. It is not just cheap no-name brands, it is household names stacked high on Costco shelves. Today's video will break down 5 coffees you might want to cut from your daily routine before it is too late. Number 1. Kirkland Signature Cold Brew Coffee. If you are someone who values convenience, you are probably no stranger to the rows of Kirkland Signature Cold Brew cans neatly lined up on Costco shelves. This ready-to-drink coffee has become a go-to choice for millions of Americans, especially those over 50, who want to skip the hassle of brewing in the morning. But behind the shiny can and the affordable price lies a truth that makes many consumers think twice. Are you drinking coffee or a daily dose of chemicals? The story starts with a name most people overlook: acrylamide. It is a chemical compound that naturally forms when starchy foods are cooked at high temperatures, and it is especially common during the coffee roasting process. But do not let the word natural fool you. According to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, acrylamide is a potential human carcinogen. And products like Kirkland Cold Brew, which are made from extra dark roasted beans canned and designed to last months on the shelf, may carry higher levels of acrylamide compared to ground or whole bean coffee. Ever wonder how this coffee manages to keep its consistent flavor for months inside a metal can? It is because of the extreme heat treatment it goes through, which is also the stage where acrylamide forms the most. A 2022 study published in the journal Food Chemistry found that canned coffees contain 40 to 80% more acrylamide than freshly ground and brewed coffee. This is especially concerning for people over 55, whose liver and kidneys are no longer as efficient at filtering out toxins. Some might say, but don't all coffees contain acrylamide? The answer is yes. The difference comes down to the dose, and here the dose is what makes the poison. A can of cold brew a day may seem harmless, but add that up over years and it can turn into an invisible health risk. In fact, the World Health Organization classified acrylamide as a probable human carcinogen all the way back in 1994, which means we have known about this hazard for over 30 years, yet very few consumers are ever warned when buying their coffee. Many older viewers might respond, I have been drinking this stuff for 5 years and I am fine. But ask yourself honestly if you often feel bloated, lose your appetite, or feel drained after your morning coffee. Have you ever wondered if it might be coming from the very product you trust the most? Another big misconception comes from the Kirkland Signature label. Because it is Costco's private brand, many people assume every Kirkland product is completely safe. The truth is, Kirkland's cold brew coffees are typically produced through large-scale industrial contracts, where cost efficiency can take priority over strict controls on the chemical byproducts of roasting. So what should you do? If you love bold and convenient iced coffee, there are healthier alternatives. Switch to whole bean coffee, preferably medium roast, grind it at home, and brew with a French press or a pour-over. It takes a few more minutes each morning, but at least you know exactly what you are putting into your body. And above all, steer clear of canned coffee drinks. No matter how convenient they are, the most likely to contain higher concentrations of harmful compounds. And do not forget to check the label. If the producer does not clearly state how the beans were roasted or where they were sourced, that is a red flag worth paying attention to. Kirkland's Signature Cold Brew Coffee is not the worst product on the market, but it is a clear example of what happens when convenience comes at the expense of quality control. If you have always believed that buying coffee at Costco was safe because of the brand, maybe it is time to rethink what safety really means in your daily choices, especially when no discount can ever buy back your health. Number 2, Kirkland Coffee Pods. If you are someone who trusts in the convenience of technology, chances are Kirkland Coffee Pods have been your morning savior at some point. One press of a button, A soft little click, and within seconds, you are holding a steaming cup of coffee. But have you ever stopped to wonder what is really inside that tiny pod besides coffee? Or worse, what happens when the container itself turns into the silent culprit poisoning you day after day? What we're talking about is something most customers, especially middle-aged and older ones, tend to ignore: the material used in the pod casing. These little pods are mass-produced with thermoplastic, a material that seems harmless, but when exposed to boiling water can release microplastics or chemical compounds called phthalates. That may sound overly technical, but here is the simple truth: the FDA has warned that these substances can disrupt hormones, affect the liver and kidneys, and lower testosterone levels. A problem many men over 55 are quietly struggling with without realizing the cause. The irony is that very few people see any danger in something as small as a coffee pod. On the outside, they look so clean, shiny, even premium. Yet that sense of safety is exactly what blinds consumers to the risks of hidden chemicals. And this is not just speculation. Multiple scientific reports have already confirmed that brewing coffee with plastic pods at high heat increases the chance of chemical compounds leaching into your drink. A 2024 independent study at Boston University tested 12 popular coffee pod brands, including Kirkland. The results showed that over 60% of the samples contained detectable levels of DEHP, a common phthalate hovering right near the EPA's threshold for hormonal disruption. Legally, the manufacturers were not breaking any rules, since the levels were under the maximum allowed. But can you honestly feel confident that drinking these every day for 5 or 10 years leaves no impact on your health? And then there is the recycling myth. Most pods are not nearly as recyclable as the marketing suggests. Many facilities only accept certain types of plastic pods or require you to peel off the filter and remove the used grounds before tossing them into the bin. For older consumers who has the time or energy to do that every single morning, which means the majority of the millions of pods consumed in the US each month end up sitting in landfills, adding to an environmental burden that future generations will have to deal with. Flavor is another issue. Have you ever noticed something feels off about coffee brewed from a pod, even if you could not quite describe it? Some customers report a strange smell, a faint plastic taste, or even a thin coating sensation in their mouth. This is not hard to explain. When high heat interacts with the plastic casing, it may not create an obvious odor, but it can still leave behind an unnatural aftertaste, which can trigger side effects for sensitive individuals, especially seniors or those with chronic health conditions. And let's not forget one simple but troubling reality with Kirkland coffee pods. You really do not know what kind of coffee you are drinking. The packaging says 100% Arabica, but which variety? From where? Were the beans washed or flash-dried with heat? Were pesticides used? None of these questions are answered. For older consumers who grew up knowing exactly where their food came from, this lack of transparency is perhaps the most worrying part. So here's the question: is a few seconds of convenience in the morning really worth the risk of chemical buildup, hormone disruption, and total uncertainty about your coffee's origins? If your answer is, I'm not so sure, then maybe it is time to rethink. The good news is there are safer alternatives: refillable metal pods, semi-automatic coffee machines, or simply going back to a classic French press, the same method our parents once used to start their day. Because at the end of the day, what we need is not just a cup of coffee. We need a habit that is safe, sustainable, and worthy of the trust you place in the ritual of every morning in your kitchen. Number 3, San Francisco Bay Coffee French Roast. If you have ever walked past the coffee aisle at Costco, you have probably seen the San Francisco Bay Coffee French Roast bag with its classy packaging and the words "family-owned, sustainably grown" printed boldly across the front. With its affordable price, rich aroma, and promise of sustainable sourcing, many customers, especially older ones, have chosen it as a reasonable alternative to pricier brands. But behind the natural and responsible image lies an uncomfortable truth: signs of burned beans, rancid oils, and a roasting process so dark it pushes past safe limits. San Francisco Bay French Roast stands out for its extremely dark roast, nearly charred. And that is the problem. When beans are roasted too far, not only does the flavor get stripped away, but the very chemical structure of the bean changes. A 2023 study from the University of Illinois found that French roast coffees can contain 3 to 4 times the recommended safe levels of polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, PAHs. a group of compounds the EPA has flagged as potential carcinogens. You read that right, the darker the roast, the higher the risk. But it does not stop there. Another issue few people notice is the oil that seeps out of these over-roasted beans. Ever opened a bag and felt a slick layer on your hands? That is oxidized oil, the result of beans roasted too hard and then exposed to air. Oxidized oil not only makes coffee taste burnt, but it also creates aldehydes compounds that can irritate the stomach, stress the liver, and trigger inflammation in the body. Younger people may not notice much, but for those in middle age or older, with existing digestive liver or blood pressure issues, this is a hidden risk that cannot be brushed aside. There is also the matter of how this brand presents itself. While it proudly markets sustainability and responsibility, San Francisco Bay does not openly release independent test results for chemical residues, roast levels, or acrylamide content. This creates a gray zone of information, and in the food industry, gray zones are always the most dangerous. Would you fully trust a brand that says we are clean but refuses to share hard safety data? Probably not. Consumer feedback adds to the concern. On senior coffee forums like Senior Coffee Lovers and Reddit's Coffee Aficionados, many report that this French roast feels heavy on the stomach, bitter in the throat, and hard to digest if consumed in the afternoon. For people over 55 who often need smoother, low-acid, easy-to-digest coffee, this overly dark profile becomes a burden instead of a pleasure. You might be asking, so does that mean all dark roasts are dangerous? The answer is not all of them. There is a line between roasting dark for flavor and roasting so far that the structure of the bean breaks down. The problem is that San Francisco Bay French roast often crosses that line. And sadly, many consumers are misled by the branding of family-owned, artisan-friendly, when in reality it is a large-scale industrial product roasted in bulk for mass distribution. So what is a better choice? If you enjoy dark roast, switch to a moderately dark coffee that comes with third-party certifications like Rainforest Alliance or Fair Trade, which include ingredient checks. Another option is to support smaller local roasters where you can ask directly about their roasting methods and temperature control. Or buy medium roast beans and lightly roast them yourself at home with a small roaster or specialty oven, giving you full control over flavor and safety. Because in the end, choosing coffee should not be about pretty packaging or friendly slogans. It should be about protecting your health, especially if you are in the stage of life where you know no cup of coffee is worth risking long-term damage, and you should never let a glossy bag hide the truths you deserve to know. Number 4, Mount Hagen Organic Instant Coffee. If you're a careful shopper who loves convenience, you've probably heard the advice, choose organic coffee, it's better for your health. That's why Mount Hagen Organic Instant Coffee, labeled as organic fair trade and freeze-dried, easily finds its way into the carts of health-conscious buyers, especially those in middle age and older. The irony is that even in the world of clean coffee, there are risks worth avoiding. The advice here is simple. If you want instant coffee, choose one made with low-temperature spray, drying with clear disclosure of heavy metal levels and purity. And most importantly, do not put blind trust in the word organic. Organic does not mean harmless. Mount Hagen may be a familiar name in the kitchens of millions of older Americans, especially for those who gave up brewed coffee out of concern for stomach issues, blood pressure, or heart rhythm. But instant coffee, organic or not, is still a heavily processed product. And with Mount Hagen, that process has raised a series of unanswered questions. A 2022 report from the Clean Label Project drew attention when it showed that certain organic coffees, including samples from Mount Hagen, contained lead PB and cadmium CD at levels higher than the industry average. While still within legal limits for older adults, whose bodies are slower at flushing out heavy metals, daily consumption of even small amounts can build up over time and affect kidney function, the nervous system, and memory. Have you ever struggled to sleep after drinking Mount Hagen, even though its caffeine content is lower than other coffees? One theory scientists have raised is that it is not just caffeine that affects the nervous system. Heavy metals like lead and cadmium, if they accumulate enough, can also trigger insomnia, anxiety, and mild cognitive decline in older adults. This is why many geriatric doctors in the US recommend coffee that is certified as heavy metal, tested, not just organic. Another detail consumers often overlook: Mount Hagen uses a freeze-dried method to preserve its coffee. It sounds premium, and while it does keep aroma better, this method also tends to increase the concentration of natural compounds in the beans, including unwanted ones like furan. a volatile substance created during roasting and once flagged by the FDA as possibly carcinogenic in animals. There is also a concerning fact: most Mount Hagen products sold at Costco or other large chains are imported from Germany or other overseas facilities, where testing standards may not always align with US guidelines, which means that even if something is certified organic in Europe, it may not fully meet the health and safety expectations of American consumers, especially those over 50 whose immune systems are more sensitive. Many people buy Mount Hagen because they believe it's light, easy to drink, gentle on the stomach. But have you ever wondered if you drink coffee without feeling noticeably alert, yet often experience dry mouth, a racing heartbeat, or irritability? Could the coffee be the reason? The answer may not be simple, but one thing is certain: you should not dismiss that suspicion too quickly, just because you assume organic coffee is always safe. And one last point: the packaging. Even though it carries a sustainable label, Mount Hagen is usually sold in glass jars with thin plastic lids and an aluminum seal underneath. When you open it, if you look closely, you might notice the seal looking discolored or not fully sealed. That small flaw can let in moisture or outside odors, directly affecting the quality of the coffee powder inside. For older adults, even details like this can be enough to trigger mild digestive issues. Mount Hagen is not a bad brand, but it is a reminder that clean does not always mean safe. When consumers, especially those in sensitive age groups, choose based on labels and a false sense of reassurance, rather than the actual production process and sourcing, that trust itself can become a double-edged sword. And that is something no brand, organic, sustainable, or fair trade, can bear on your behalf once the consequences appear. Number 5, New Mexico Piñon Coffee Dark Piñon Single Serve Cups. New Mexico Piñon Coffee Dark Piñon Single Serve Cups sounds local, sounds artisanal, and that alone makes it easy to win people over. Many older customers, especially retired couples, enjoy discovering a flavor that feels both familiar and special. It carries that bold American roast people know, but with the regional twist of Piñon, which makes it feel like a hometown specialty. For some, it feels like a warm, comforting experience. For others who are more cautious about what they consume, it raises red flags, because not every so-called natural flavor actually comes from nature. If you have ever looked closely at the packaging for Dark Piñon, you might have noticed the words naturally flavored. It sounds reassuring. In reality, it is more of a distraction than a clear promise. According to FDA guidelines, natural flavors can include compounds that are extracted, altered, or blended from natural sources. That does not mean they are free from chemical processing. And in the case of Piñon, a nut native to the Southwest, recreating its flavor on an industrial scale almost always involves additives or alcohol-based extracts. Here is the real issue: when these natural flavor compounds enter your body regularly, especially through a hot drink like coffee, they do not just stop at your throat. A 2023 report from the National Institutes of Health found that some natural flavor compounds, when exposed to high heat, can generate aldehydes. These molecules may irritate the respiratory tract or even affect nerve cells if they build up over time. Younger people usually have the liver, kidneys, and nervous system strength to handle that, but for those over 55, the risks climb sharply. And then there's the packaging. These single-serve cups, much like pods, come with their own concerns. The manufacturer may claim the packaging is recyclable, but that does not guarantee it is safe when hot water at near boiling temperatures passes through it. Unfortunately, many consumers trust the local pride and handcrafted tradition slogans without realizing this is still a mass-produced commercial product. The flavor may be unique. But if what you are drinking each morning is really just a mix of over-roasted beans and vague flavoring compounds, then no matter how good it smells, it is still a gamble with your health. And that is a risk no one, especially those hoping for stability in their later years, should ignore. You can love coffee, but your health deserves more love than that. This video is not meant to scare you, but to wake you up. The more complicated the market becomes, and the more packaging tells you exactly what you want to hear, the more important it is to stay alert. Awareness is no longer optional. It is your responsibility. And for those who have already lived more than half a lifetime as the body slows down, that morning cup of coffee is not just a routine. It is also a test of your immune system, your nervous system, and your vital organs.
This video does not promote diffusion within the United States or encourage segregation. All content is presented for the purpose of exploration, analysis, and fostering discussion based on current events, public sentiment, and social trends. We fully respect the United States Constitution and all federal regulations. If today's analysis made you think, drop a comment so we can keep the conversations going. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you will never miss our next independent deep dive.